So your heart starts pounding. Your hands get shaky and clammy. Your breathing starts to pick up. You start to sweat. All these things are things that can happen when you're sitting watching a horror movie or walking up the basement stairs after turning out the light. Anytime you're afraid, anytime fear kicks in. But for many of us, that's a common feeling as anxiety starts to take over and kicks into a panic attack. And what's frustrating is it can often be for no reason at all, or normal stuff that people struggle with every day kicks us into overdrive. So my first video is really a confession about depression and anxiety, and my effort to get out and kind of tell my story as a hope to draw awareness to anxiety and depression that ultimately would help people identify the need for help in their life, that there's a better quality of life out there, and maybe even just help those that don't struggle with it, or maybe don't struggle with it on a high level. Maybe help those people understand and help their loved ones who may be suffering from it. And then my second video, I talked about being alone together, and through this shutdowns and everything that's going on, as we find more time alone potentially, that we make the most of it. And really a challenge to intentionally find time alone and spend that time in reflective thought. And the purpose for that reflective thought is to understand and process what's going on in our lives and what's going on in our feelings as we struggle with anxiety, and to try to pin down and recognize the triggers that amplify the anxiety and depression. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about what do we do with that information? What are some things we can try? How can we alter what we do every day, and alter what we do in the moment when that anxiety attack and that panic attack starts kicking in? So again, I'm not a medical professional of any kind. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a man with depression and anxiety, and I want to share my story in an effort to help you. So I really look at categories for help here in three different categories. The first being your foundational management. So how do we manage our depression and anxiety? You really need a strong foundation to get you moving forward for a better quality of life. And really that's going to be talking to your healthcare provider, talk to your doctor, talk to a therapist, get out there and ask for help. And that's tough, especially for guys. I mean, we don't want to do that. You know, we look at people with depression and anxiety and panic attacks, the natural stigma around that, or cultural stigma around that, is weakness. You know, oh man, they can't handle their stuff, you know. And that's not necessarily the case. It really isn't. And as guys, we want to try to muscle our way through stuff, and we want to try to just prove that we're strong enough to do it. And we look at reaching out for help as a sign of weakness, that we are not strong enough to do this. So that's why we need help. And really, I don't view it that way. I did for a long time, but you know, I come to a realization that reaching out for help can be one of the strongest things you've ever done. Bypassing all of those cultural stigmas, and bypassing and overcoming all of the resistance to that, and being strong enough to stand out and say, you know, I don't care what people think. I need a little help with this. Now, what an example, men, that you set when you do that for the next generation and for other men around you. So I challenge you. Get that foundational help. Speak up, speak out. Even if it's just a little bit, it goes a long way. But again, that's not my area of expertise. I can tell you what I've done. You got to go to the professionals. And then I look at the other two categories of being routine management and crisis management. So routine management is stuff that we do every day, just the normal day-to-day stuff that we do that unknowingly and unintentionally can fuel and aggravate our anxiety and our depression. And then the crisis management is, okay, I'm in the moment right now. This anxiety, this panic is seizing me. I'm losing control. How do I get that control back? And I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So routine management is tough. We're creatures of routine, and routine can often give us a sense of peace and familiarity that helps conquer that anxiety. I, for one, am big on routine. I love my daily routine, my morning stuff. I don't like it when things go off the beaten course very much. It triggers that anxiety. This is not what I had planned, and unfortunately, that's life. But as we look at our routine, there are things that we can control, or we should do our best to control, to try to break free from that. I'm going to put a link in the description for a page that I read from Mayo Clinic. Again, do some research on this stuff. Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, go to reputable sources. There's so much valuable information out there on finding that better quality of life. But this particular article I was reading brought up a lot of those day-to-day stuff that we do. One of which, interestingly enough, was caffeine. I mean, it really is kind of common sense when you think about it. Caffeine can make anybody jittery and anxious. Imagine if you're already jittery and anxious and now you've amplified this. I am a big coffee drinker, and I brag about how strong I make my coffee and how black my coffee is. I don't add milk, I don't add sugar, I fill that coffee filter as full as I can possibly fill it. And, as I'm reading this, I'm like, hey, maybe this is something I should try. And so, I'm not saying I'm never going to have another cup of coffee again, but as part of my routine, I thought, let's mix it up a bit. So what I did is I switched to tea, and I'm drinking relatively strong tea. So I still get my warming, soothing, routine drink in the morning. I'm still getting the caffeine that I need because my shift starts at 6 a.m. and I got a 45-minute drive. So I still get that caffeine to kind of get me going in the morning. And so that's valuable, but I'm not amplifying it so much. It's just a reduction, I thought about switching to decaf or half calf. I thought, I'm just going to be bold, mix it up all together. So I switched to tea. And I've noticed a huge difference. I mean, it's remarkable how much better I feel throughout the day. And what's really interesting is I had a cup of coffee last weekend. So this is about 2 weeks I've done this now. Had a cup of coffee last weekend. And holy cow, I mean, I noticed right away the difference that it had. I could feel my heart racing. I could feel all this stuff happen. I got extremely agitated, and that anxiety started to kick in. And again, I'm not saying I'm never going to have a cup of coffee, but I'm certainly going to be a little more careful about how much caffeine I really consume at one given time. And maybe it's not coffee for you. Maybe it's an energy drink. Maybe it's something like that. But it's just a suggestion to be conscious about. What we eat and drink really directly affects our body. And that increased heart rate that caffeine brings you, and one of the other things that can do it is sugar too. I have a big sweet tooth, so I'm trying to be conscious of that. I'm not doing so well, not with all the Easter candy laying around. But as you eat that sugar, again, it increases your heart rate and gets things going. It sets the perfect stage for an anxiety attack. It really does. Biologically, what's happening in your body, it sets that perfect stage for it. And it's interesting because coffee is such a part of so many of it's almost a personality, part of our personalities. We love coffee, we love our iced coffee, our coffee shops and things like that. And it just, is part of our identity. And it's interesting that something can bring you so much comfort and energy and get you going, and then at the same time just sabotage your day. So it's things like that we should be conscious of, things about our routine. Another very valuable part of our routine, and I'm going to bank off of the last video that we talked about, but that reflective thought. So as a Christian in my faith, spending time in prayer is incredibly valuable for me because it allows me to have that reflective thought while also channeling and focusing on things that I'm thankful for, things that, those positive things in my life, as well as having a concentrated source of hope. That somebody's in control, and somebody's got me. Somebody's got this. It's all good. It'll all work out in the end. And so that brings me a lot of comfort. Similar things, meditation, yoga, anything like that allows your brain just to kind of shut down, get away from the screen, and free up those thoughts and allow you to kind of reflect and think about, how can I strategize? How can I handle this a little bit differently? How can I process this? Those are all, I mean, solid things that people have been using for millennia to combat anxiety. So that's your routine stuff. And it really is going to be different for everybody. This is just stuff that I do. But anxiety is has a wide spectrum. And so people can deal with it on a lighter version where it's an uncomfortable thing, and they can deal with it on a crippling edge where panic attacks are a daily occurrence. I mean, it's such a broad spectrum of this, and everybody's different. And that's why that reflective thought, that's why that time, that thought process as you begin to try to identify your triggers is so important. And that's why identifying your triggers is so important, because everybody is different, and you've got to find out for you those things that are gonna help. And then we come to the crisis management. Okay, so I've done all that I can in my routine, but there are still going to be moments where it becomes unbearable. There's still going to be moments where that anxiety kicks up, the panic attack starts setting in, or even well before we get to that panic attack. Now what do we do? And I think the key is understanding biologically what's happening. Like I mentioned, your heart rate picks up, your breathing picks up. All of those things channel into this fight or flight mode. And that's critical to understand, because what's happening is literally your survival instincts are kicking in. If you were, hundreds or thousands of years ago living, in the wild, this anxiety is going to kick you into a survival fight or flight mode, and it's going to save your life. And that's interesting to think about, because it's going to make you faster, it's going to make you stronger, it's going to get you out of there or combat the threat. The problem is, in our modern society, we experience anxiety about these things that we can't run from, or we can't fight. Some of these things are it's just life, and we have to endure. And that's an incredible challenge. So understanding that this is a natural response to danger, or a natural response to stress. It's just that our modern society isn't very natural, so it's hard to make it fit in there. But understanding that's important, because then you can begin to try to convince your brain, try to convince your body that I don't need to run right now. I don't need to flee right now. Right now, I just need to chill. I need to calm down so I can think clearly and gain a hold of my situation again. And one of the first things that the experts will tell you, both my kids as therapists, I have 2 kids that see a therapist for depression and anxiety, and one of the biggest things they talk about is that breathing. Start with that. And I know a lot of people say, oh, I've tried that, it doesn't work. It goes beyond that, but that's really a good place to start. So as your breathing starts to rapidly pick up, stop. Breathe in, hold it, and then let it out. And do that several times. Biologically, it starts to take an effect, but the rest is up to you. We still gotta gain control back. The next thing you're gonna want to do is find ways to root yourself in reality, in this present moment that you're in. And so we'll tell the kids, find 5 things that you can see, and try to focus on those things, and try to look for the details of those things. It could be a picture on the wall, it could be something in the room, it could be something, but it's got to be something tangible in the room that's going to distract them from this anxiety and root them back into reality. For me, some things that I do is I try to focus on a task. Sometimes I'll use escapism. I'll go play a video game, put on the TV, try to do something to get my mind off it. And those things kind of help. Sometimes they help a lot, but generally speaking, it's kind of mixed results. I find I have much more results in doing something productive. And that may be just because of how my anxiety is, has that, hey, you're not good enough. It's constantly beating you up. It's constantly making you feel like you're not doing enough with your life. I have this existential dread thing going on, right? So as you struggle with that, a lot of times I'll put on headphones, crank up the music. You'd think I would recommend calming music, but that's not always the case. Sometimes that is what I do. I like to put it on the TV in the house, so it just sets a tone for the whole house. But oftentimes when it's really bad, and I'll listen to anything that can just get my mind off it. Or, you know, when I have a theory, maybe we'll explore in another video about how music can let you process those emotions. And sometimes extremely depressing music or extremely angry music or angsty music or whatever can help you kind of flush, get that out. It's not always about repressing this stuff. It isn't. It's about processing this stuff. So anyway, I'll save that for another one. But I'll put the headphones on, I'll get into it, and I'll try to go do something. Maybe it's just doing the dishes or cleaning up the kitchen. Maybe it's going out in the garage working on the car, mowing the lawn, whatever it is. I try to do something productive, and it does two things for me. Number one, it gives me that distraction, pulls me away from that anxiety. I'm focusing on something. I'm focusing on what I'm doing. I've got the music going. That helps too. The other thing is it gives me that sense of satisfaction that I accomplished something, and a sense of accomplishment can go a long way to help combating feelings of worthlessness, you know. And so I can feel much better about myself and say, hey, kitchen's clean, you know. In this world that I can't control much, you know, everything going on in society today and everything going on in the world today, there can be a strong feeling of a lack of control with what's going to happen in your life, with your job situation or whatever. But sometimes just cleaning helps you take control back just a little bit, you know, and accomplish something while you're at it. So those things help. Breathing, distraction, you know, rooting yourself in the present moment that you're in, and then finding something to give you something that you can accomplish, something that you can step back and say, hey, look, I conquered this feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, and I did something, and that's pretty cool. So those are a few things. And again, do the research. Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, man, there's so many things out there. So many great resources, solid, medically, scientifically backed research studies as we try to understand this so much better. Get out there and study for yourself. Learn what's going on. Try to understand what's happening with you. But before I end, I just want to encourage you. Because if you're watching this, and you've watched any of the other two, it means either you're struggling with it and maybe this is helping you, that's cool. Or maybe you're just trying to understand it because you know somebody that does. And you know what, that's cool too. So thank you for that. If this video helps you in any way, like, subscribe. The more activity I see, it's an encouragement to me because I know that, hey, maybe what I'm doing and maybe what I'm going through is helping somebody else. And that's really what we all need to do, is look out for each other as we struggle with this, as we fight these battles and try to find that better quality of life. And on the final note I want to say is looking at the fight or flight, that survival instinct. Anxiety, fear, worry, whatever, when it kicks you into that mode, right, fight or flight, is it possible that anxiety can be a kind of superpower? All right, I might be exaggerating a little bit, but I'll talk about that next time. Thanks, guys.